On September 24th, Prairie Theatre Exchange kicked off their 2024-25 season with a situation comedy called Bed and Breakfast. This is a true farce that is sure to leave audiences rolling in the aisles. When the character Brett unexpectedly inherits the historic family home, he and his partner Drew abandon their frustrating careers and move out of the fast-paced, high-priced Toronto to set up a B&B in a quiet little tourist town. But when they face friction in their new community, they discover the simple life is more complicated than they thought. With more than a few unexpected and hilarious plot twists and dozens of quirky characters all portrayed by just two men, Bed and Breakfast is a theatrical tour de force, as riotously funny as it is deeply moving. This is a heartfelt comedy about being out in small town Ontario, skeletons in the closet, and finding a place to call home. In PTE's production of Bed and Breakfast, the character of Drew is portrayed by Kyle Golemba. Kyle Golemba is originally from Saskatchewan. He holds a Bachelor of Musical Theatre performance degree from Sheridan College and a Master of Arts in Theatre Studies from the University of Guelph. His work on stage has taken him across Canada, including seasons at Stratford, Shaw, and the Charlottetown festivals. The character of Brett in Bed and Breakfast is portrayed by Amir Haidar. Originally from Lebanon, Amir has traveled across Canada performing in such productions as Sweeney Todd, Rent, and Oklahoma for a variety of theatre companies. He holds a BFA in musical theatre from Sheridan College and is currently a PhD student at the University of Toronto. And joining me here in the Classic 107 studio to talk about the show Bed and Breakfast, I am joined by Kyle Golemba, who plays the character of Drew. Hey, Kyle, nice to have you here.
Thanks so much. It's nice to be here.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the run of the play started on September the 24th. How have the shows been going, and how have you been enjoying Winnipeg audiences?
It's been great. We actually did the show earlier this summer at the Capitol Theatre in Port Hope, where the show originated for us. And so we did about a few weeks there. So we started rehearsal here by running the entire show just first day and seeing how it went. So it was fun to revisit it. And now that we've gotten to have a few Winnipeg audiences, it's been really fun to connect with a new group of people and see how they're reacting to everything. And so far, they've been finding it just as funny as we'd hoped. So we're having a really good time.
Great. As you mentioned, this is not your first time performing this play. Does the stage direction change depending upon the venue? And can you talk about some of the staging that you needed to adapt for Winnipeg?
Yeah, it's actually the really exciting thing about this leg of the run for us, because we did in Port Hope in a proscenium theater, so the audience is completely in front of us. But for anyone who's been to PTE, you know, it's the fabulous thrust stage, so the audience is on three sides of us. Mm-hmm. So we did have to do some restaging, which actually was a great thing because it gave us a new point of focus. So we weren't just kind of regurgitating what we did previously this summer, but actually got to re-explore and find some really new, wonderful ways of staging things, so that everyone in the audience can experience the show in the same way and not feel disadvantaged by where they are in the theater. So it was actually just a really fun opportunity to just re-explore the play a little bit and have some more fun with what we could do in this new space.
Mm-hmm. Without giving too much away, can you give a quick synopsis of the play? It's really the death of an aunt that gets the ball rolling, right?
Yeah. So my character, Brett, his aunt dies in the first minute and a half, so that's not a spoiler. She dies in a car accident. And so we go to the small town for the funeral. And we start to meet some of Brett's family and these kind of colorful characters that are part of this community. And I find out at the funeral that I've actually inherited my aunt's house, and we're looking for a house. So we initially go to the town to put it on the market, but then we decide, you know what, we love this small town pace. Let's run a bed and breakfast. How hard could it be? And of course, that's where all the drama and comedy stems from. As we get to meet all these people in the town, as we try to make this bed and breakfast happen, and as we experience what it is to be a gay couple in a small town.
Yeah. The play is written by Mark Crawford, and he has performed it with his real-life partner, Paul Dunn. Have you met either Crawford or Dunn in the process of workshopping the play? And if so, did they give you any advice?
Yeah, actually, Mark is an old friend. We were at school at the same time, and Paul as well is a good friend. They were actually at our opening in Port Hope, which was extremely nerve-wracking, not only to have the playwright, but also two people who'd played our roles before sitting there in the audience, you know. But no, they were just super supportive. They had a great time with our production, and they loved, what we did with it. I think every actor brings their stamp. We each get to play 10 or 11 other characters in the play. So, we're playing like my mom, my brother, my dad, people in the community and stuff like that. So I think we each bring our own slant to these characters and our own sort of flair to them. And I think they just really enjoyed that.
Yeah. There's several characters in the show, as you mentioned. I was reading somewhere, all told, there's 22 characters or something like that?
Yeah, I was trying to count in my head, and I keep losing track of people, but I think it's like 21 or 22. Amir and I each play about 10 or 11 each.
Yeah, so how do you go about portraying the different characters? And apparently the switches happen, like, fast, right?
Yeah, I mean, in certain scenes, we're each playing, 3 or 4 people at times, so it can be quite tricky. But we had a lot of fun discovering what that would be like when we were in rehearsal. A lot of this is based on a technique called vocal mask, which I won't bore listeners going into too much. But basically, it's you create a physical and a vocal signature for every character. So, for example, I play Allison, who owns a coffee shop. And Allison has a side ponytail. And she kind of has a bit of a higher voice like this. She's a bit spacey and a bit kind of sweet, And then, like, my brother, Steve, always has a beer in his hand. He's like, how's it going, boys? That sort of tight jaw kind of thing, and so we just kind of have those physicalities that we instantly switch to. So without changing costumes or wigs or anything like that, the audience absolutely knows who we've become.
It sounds so great. Can you talk about some of the more memorable characters in the play? Apparently, there's some real characters.
Yes, one of my absolute favorites is Amir's, and he is so funny as this character, Carrie, who is someone who grew up in the small town, never left, had a kid, and became a realtor. And it's hard to describe, but when Amir walks onto the stage as Carrie, it's like you can just see how big her hair is, and you can feel like how long her nails are and smell her bright perfume. She is hysterical, and the audiences love her every single time, and it still cracks me up, and it's been months. And he also plays this contractor, Doug, who's, the sort of gruff exterior. Maybe there's a heart of gold somewhere deep down. We're not totally sure. But he also has a lot of really memorable moments in the play. And it's just fun to see, especially Amir, just embody all these wonderful people.
Mm-hmm. I would say one of the major subjects of the play is being out and in a gay partnership in rural Ontario. It's a major theme. And apparently homophobia is in the play. How is that dealt with, and how do they deal with it comedically?
Yeah. It's dealt with in both big and small ways. Something very, very obvious happens in the play that's like a real, what people would think of as homophobia. And there's also little tiny sort of more passive slights that people might not think of as much as homophobia, but is also something that a lot of queer people experience. But the genius of Mark Crawford is that he always knows when to let the play settle into something more difficult and then immediately follow it by a joke. Mm-hmm. So that we absolutely deal with the things that we deal with, but we still have a lot of heart and laughter in and around those things, and we can see the foibles of the characters involved. But yeah, it's not your typical sort of hard look at homophobia, or it's not a downer kind of story where it's only the focus. It's like it's part of what the characters experience, but there's so much around it that has so much heart and is really quite uplifting and beautiful at the same time.
Yeah, and just sort of making that transition into rural life and becoming part of the community.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I was reading about it. Apparently there is a hilariously funny opening of the bed and breakfast that takes place. And in a couple of reviews I was reading, the Faulty Towers came up. Is it that same level of fast-paced, hilarious anarchy?
That section of the play especially, yes, is the most sort of farcical that we get. And it is very much the sort of twists and turns, slamming doors, lighting effects, all sorts of things as we become 6 or 7 different characters in that scene, with Brett and Drew at the heart of it, trying to manage the B&B with all these people and all their foibles and everything that's happening. It's a lot of fun, and usually that sequence definitely gets a big reaction from the crowd.
Sounds fantastic. And there's some plot twists and turns that happen as well. Can you give me some examples of some sudden plot twists?
Yeah, I won't say too much because I don't want to give anything away. But there is something about Maggie that is discovered earlier in the play, and that becomes a central sort of plot point throughout, about figuring out a little bit more about the family history. And that's one of the deep threads that's part of this play that I think Mark has done so beautifully. And it's really fun. I think the audiences get surprised every night with what happens, and I think that's definitely part of the adventure.
Fantastic. What is the most challenging thing about performing the play? I mean, performing all of these different characters, the first thing that pops to my mind is stamina. Like, how do you keep it going throughout the show?
Amir and I both started working on the play at least a month before we started rehearsal because we just knew it's like a 67-page script. We only rehearsed for about 2.5 weeks in Port Hope, so we knew we couldn't just kind of come in and like crack open the script on day one. We had to kind of come in with a bit of work done already. So that was part of the stamina building. You're totally right. Honestly, I think the hardest thing is each act is maybe 45, 50 minutes and we never leave the stage. So it's drinking enough water that we are able to maintain our vocal prowess, I suppose, throughout the show because we're playing all these different people, but also we can't leave. So it's like a delicate balance. But I have to say, performing with Amir, we've gotten to know each other very, very well over the course of this production, and we can read each other really well now. We really support each other through if one of our energies is flagging or if something funny is happening or, you can hear something in the audience. I think we've both gotten really good at supporting each other through that dance. And so we actually just have a ton of fun. And it honestly, every night feels like it's over before you know it. We just have so much fun when we're doing the play together.
Mm-hmm. In 25 words or less, big challenge. Can you talk about some of the life lessons that are learned by Drew and Brett, and what do you also think that the audience is going to learn?
Wow, that's one. Being yourself and not being able to control how other people view you, but you just have to be who you are, I think is a real central thing of the play in terms of the lessons. It's about family. It's about who gets to be your family as opposed to who is officially your family. And it's also about not judging others as much as not being judged yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
Perfect. Kyle, this has just been fantastic to have you here today. Thanks for taking the time to stop by and talk about Bed and Breakfast.
I could talk about it forever. Thanks for having me.
Hilarious show. For our Classic 107 listeners, PTE's presentation of Bed and Breakfast runs until Sunday, October 6th. For more details, visit PTE's website at pte.mb.ca, or you can go to classic107.com and find more details there as well. Kyle, thanks again.
Thank you so much.